Well, hi folks, this is Darren with My RV Works. Today we're in Port Angeles, Washington. We're just beyond where our yard is. It's a beautiful spring day, people cutting grass. You might hear some weed eaters in the background, sorry about that. But it's spring cleaning. We've got some cooling units here. These are cooling units out of a refrigerator. Not one, but 3 different refrigerators. And you may look over here to my right, you'll see that I've taken all the foam off. And why did you do that, Darren? Because we're gonna go really deep into following the trail of ammonia. We're gonna understand everything there is to know about what these things do. The other day, when we were cleaning these out, my son asked a question, well, Dad, how are you supposed to create cold from heat? Because there's a boiler down here and it gets really, really hot. And how are you supposed to make ice cream cold and ice cold? How does that work with heat? And I started to explain it to him, and I decided, you know, this would make a really great video. So we kind of cleaned off all the foam off the back, and this is what they looked like before. And so maybe I'll start the video by showing you what they look like before, then we'll zoom over to here and explain what's going on inside of these tubes. So should be a fun video. Looking forward to sharing it with you. Here we go. Okay folks, so I've got Dakota here to help me explain a little bit of the significance of the history of the cooling unit. Now the cooling unit, Dakota, was invented in France in 1858, a whole 162 years ago. You remember that day? Mm-hmm. What else? What was going on in 1858? Denver was founded in 1858, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Denver was founded in 1858. Let's see. Minnesota was the 32nd state admitted into the Union. Let's see, you had Bleeding Kansas. Those were a lot of wars that were going on in Kansas over the slavery issue right there in Kansas. So that war lasted several years. And but Bleeding Kansas, it happened in 1858. What else was going on in 1858? We had the Seminole Wars down in Florida, right? Mm-hmm. That ended in a treaty. And that's where we have that boundary line between Florida and Georgia over the Seminole Treaty. We also had some wars going on over in Utah. The Mormon Wars, or the Utah Wars was going on in 1858. James Buchanan was president. He was our 15th president. This would have been like 3 years before the Civil War broke out. 1858 was also the same year that Lincoln gave his "A house divided against itself shall not stand" speech in Springfield when he accepted the Republican nomination for president then. Mm-hmm. And Lincoln became our 16th president, didn't he? Yeah. And I found out this other little thing. Theodore Roosevelt, who became our 26th president, was actually born in 1858 in New York City. So that was kind of exciting. And you had mentioned Denver, and Denver was founded then. But also, remember, go back to the 49ers, right? California football team. The 49ers in 1849, they went down to California and were looking for gold. But in 1858, they made their way up to Pikes Peak for the Pikes Peak Gold Rush. When all that was happening in the United States, there was a guy in France, a scientist in France, who basically invented this absorption refrigerator concept. He didn't look quite like these do today, but so in 1858, when all that was going on in the United States, was how old this technology is, 162 years ago as of about now. Mm-hmm. Okay. So yeah, in 1858, a French scientist invented the concept of the absorption refrigerator. And it wasn't until 1922 that there was 2 college students in Sweden, yeah, and they improved upon his model. And instead of using a pump, they used ammonia, and they started to play around with it. So that was 1922, okay? And we won't go into all the stuff that happened in 1922. Even though we could, it's very exciting, okay? The Roaring 20s. And, but then in 1923 is when production really started to kick off on these products. And then so it was like a curve up, and by the time you get to the 1960s, these absorption style refrigerators were everywhere. Now I remember it would have been my grandfather's, your great-grandfather. He was an electrician, and I worked for him when I was 7 all the way up until I was in my teens as an electrician's helper. So I'd been your age working with an electrician. How about that? Anyway, I'd go to his house, and he had an ice box. They called them ice boxes back then in the late 70s, mid 70s, okay? Anyway, they had an ice box, and it had this round radiator thing up on the top, and I remember it had feet on it. But anyway, it had this little pull handle. You open the door, and that's where the popsicles were. I remember that. So I've had a brush across these things before. Now, the cool thing about these absorption refrigerators, the absorption concept, we're thinking, oh, this is old technology, it's only for RVs. Did you know that the same exact absorption concept is on our International Space Station to regulate temperature?
No, I did not know that.
Did not know that. So it's not that the technology is really old, but this whole concept of the absorption principle of refrigeration is even alive and well on an International Space Station, somewhere up there. And what's my favorite sport? Come on.
Hockey.
Hockey, yes, I love hockey. And the hockey rinks, all those, they're kept frozen and cold from the same concept that's in our RV refrigerators, the principle of ammonia absorbing. What was the question you had for me the other day? I don't remember.
Cold.
How does heat create cold? How does heat create cold? And what we're going to do is we're going to dive really deep, deeper than you ever wanted to know on that principle. If you've watched my other videos, you know I like to follow the trail. We're going to be following the trail of 12 volts, 120 volts. We're going to be following the trail of hydraulics. We're going to be following the trail of plumbing. I was always following the trail. This is a story of following the trail of ammonia. We're going to follow the trail of ammonia. And so what I'm going to do is enough on us. We're going to move the camera closer to the cooling unit here and start pointing out some of the features and explain how these cooling units actually cool with heat. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, so if ammonia is the main character of our ensemble, okay, there are several other supporting members of that ammonia, okay? And there's going to be ammonia in this, hydrogen, distilled water, sodium chromate, heat, pressure, gravity, levelness, and venting. I think I've got a lot of that covered. So those are all the supporting cast members to make the ammonia work. It's really the story of ammonia. Ammonia is the magic ingredient that makes this work. So, but what's so special about these things? I mean, why do we need this type of refrigerator? The thing is, this refrigerator, this absorption cooling process works with no moving parts, no motors, no sound at all.
No pistons.
No pistons, nothing like that. In fact, all you have to do, once all your chemicals are in there that we mentioned, all you have to do is apply heat. That's it. You apply heat. In our RV refrigerators, I keep pointing to this one, I don't know if you're in the shot, but in our RV refrigerators, heat is in the form of an LP or it's in the form of a electric heating element. But in other places, in industrial settings, heat could come from a solar array, heat could come from waste products from an industrial process. Like I said, on the International Space Station, yeah, they're keeping their beer and their ice cold. They're keeping their Kool-Aid cold and their milk cold, but they just need to apply heat, probably from the sun. And their water, they want to have cold water. So with all that being said, you just apply heat. Once your chemicals are in it, it's a sealed system. Once your chemicals are in it, you apply heat and then you get cold. Now, why ammonia? It turns out that the ensemble of ammonia, hydrogen, water, and ammonia, hydrogen, water, and sodium chromate are the absolute perfect cast for this performance. I'm trying to do a movie theme, okay? It's the most perfect cast for this. Why ammonia? Ammonia's vaporization properties are stellar, bar none. It is a wonderful element. When it vaporizes, it absorbs the heat around it. So for that reason alone, ammonia is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful element to have in here. When it vaporizes, it absorbs heat, okay? So that's key. When ammonia vaporizes, it absorbs heat. Kind of like when you're running and you're exercising and then you're sweating and that sweat causes you to cool. We call that evaporation, okay? Well, that's kind of the same concept. Now, ammonia is readily absorbed in water. Remember we said one of the cast characters here was water. So ammonia is readily absorbed in water, So therefore, water is a wonderful product to have in here. Ammonia is readily absorbed in water, but when you boil the water, the ammonia readily releases out of that water. So you have a perfect scenario where ammonia will be absorbed into water, and then when you boil the water, the ammonia comes back out. Wow, that's perfect. The other thing is when ammonia vaporizes and it goes through that vaporization, that does it at minus 28 degrees. The vaporization coefficient of ammonia is minus 28. So when ammonia vaporizes, it does that at minus 28. So anything that it's touching, anything around it, the pieces of steel and everything anything it radiates, it's minus 28, okay? So that's kind of exciting. And now, there is not all good news here. There is some bad news. The bad news is that ammonia is extremely toxic. It's very toxic. What that means is if you put ammonia in here, it'll start to corrode and rust and eat a lot of the steel that we have there. So therefore, we have to have that other supporting cast member, sodium chromate. That is an anti-rust inhibitor that they put inside of this to work with that ammonia, and it flows through the whole system to prevent that ammonia from being so toxic to the steel, okay? Now, so we've talked about the principles of ammonia, why it's a great element to have in here because of the vaporization. We talked about how it could readily be absorbed in water, how it can boil off. We talked about the vaporization at -28. Water is there because ammonia is readily absorbed into the water, and you can boil the water and the ammonia pops back out. Why hydrogen? It turns out that hydrogen, as we all know from 8th grade science class, you're not quite there yet, okay? But hydrogen is the lightest gas. It's also the gas with the most thermal conductivity properties. A kitty cat joining our show here. So hydrogen is a wonderful element to have because when that ammonia vaporizes, it vaporizes into a hydrogen environment. Hydrogen helps to carry the heat away. It's a wonderful gas for that. But as the ammonia absorbs into the hydrogen, the ammonia weighs down the hydrogen, pulling it down, down, down. We're going to get into all that in a minute. Everything I'm covering right now is going to make sense when I talk about this cooling unit here. So therefore, the ammonia goes through its processes. We're going to cover that in detail. The water is used to absorb and boil. The hydrogen is used as a thermal carrier of the ammonia as it absorbs the heat. And the sodium chromate is used as a anti-rust inhibitor. And then that leaves leveling. You could see we're going to talk about leveling in a minute, but you can see these tubes here, they're not that far off kilter. The problem with the leveling in your RV, let's see, say your prayers and brush your teeth before you go to bed, put your seatbelt on, and level your refrigerator, right? Isn't that the thing? Leveling your refrigerator is just as important as all those things. Well, if you don't level your refrigerator, what happens in these things is the sodium chromate can get in a stagnant area. It's not flowing like it's supposed to, okay? And because the sodium chromate is not flowing like it's supposed to, it could stagnate, it could crystallize. And when it crystallizes, it causes a blockage, therefore you don't have a flow. And if you have a blockage, therefore you've just ruined your whole cooling unit. So that's why it's so important to operate these things level. The manufacturer says 3 degrees left or right, 6 degrees fore and aft. So we want to make sure that when we're operating our refrigerator, the refrigerator's level. Regardless of what the RV is, the refrigerator should be level. Manufacturer will state that they want you to take a bubble level, put it in the freezer compartment. Floor of the freezer compartment is where they want you to check that and make sure that that's level. So with covering that, now I think what we'll do, Dakota, is let's lay this down on the ground and then we can really start pointing out some of the things that happen here. Okay? You like that? Mm-hmm. All right, let's do that next. If I were working on my RV and this was a service hatch on the bottom half, I'm looking in on this part right here, okay? You don't see the rest of this. Now, this silvery part, this is the part that you would see. You might notice some foil tape or some duct tape taping up this. In the trades, we call this area the cat box. In the refrigerator, there's a big void here. Now, I'm about to flip this thing over as well. But so a little bit of pieces. This vessel here is the absorption vessel or the leveling vessel, okay? This is gonna be your boiler here. This is your rectifier in this area. Up in the top, the fins up here. This is your condenser, okay? We're gonna, like I said, I've got one of these all taken apart and we're gonna show you that. But just pointing out some areas. This is your low temperature evaporator. This is your high temperature evaporator. These are your absorption tubes, okay? So I wanted to show you that now. Let me flip this over. So we flipped over the cooling unit, and what I wanted to show you, let me scooch over here. I'm gonna lean against the absorber vessel. We don't need to know about him. We're gonna learn all about him in a minute. But what you're gonna see, I'm just gonna go over this really quick because what we've got is Dakota and I have taken all the foam off of this to show you the guts inside of here. We've skinned it and cleaned it, right? Okay, and so the coldest part is gonna be coming up here. And when that ammonia vaporizes, remember we were talking about the vaporization pressure being minus 28, and even colder sometimes? That's this spot right here. And so it works its way down, and as that ammonia vaporizes, the heat is absorbed around it. And if you look inside your freezer, you're gonna have like this C shape, this heat sink thing. The roof of your freezer is gonna be metal, the bottom floor of your freezer is metal, and the back wall is metal. With me? But anyway, that metal acts as a heat sink. So your ice cream, your chicken, your broccoli, your cold frozen peas, all that stuff touching that metal surface is actually touching this metal surface. And this metal surface is the one where the ammonia is doing the evaporation. So if there's evaporation taking place, it's taking the heat with it. We're going to get into that even more. I keep teasing you guys, but we're going to get into that a little bit more when we do the breakaway. But I wanted to show you that this area here is called the low temperature evaporator, this being the high temperature evaporator. This one's going to be about 15 degrees, okay? So minus 28 and 15. So between here and here, it's absorbing all the heat, okay? So this is the part that your freezer's attached to, and you can maybe look and see some of these screw holes. If you look in the back, that back C-shape, whatever, of your heat sink in your freezer, you'll see the screws. Well, they screw directly onto this. This is a mastic paste. That's a heat transfer paste that is helping that heat transfer. And then this section here, you see the screws. If you open up your refrigerator and you look between all those fins, you'll see some screws. Those screws screw directly to this plate, and this is the 15-degree plate. And again, we have some heat transfer mastic. So what I want to do now is we're going to get rid of this one, and we're going to bring in the one that Dakota and I, we took some time to take all this foam out to get behind the scenes. And Dakota's going to go steady cam with the camera, and we're going to zoom in on some things, and we're going to go a little bit deeper on all the pieces, parts that make this thing work. Okay, so here we go. Okay, let's dive into the breakaway. What exactly is going on inside of this thing? We've talked about the elements that are inside of it, the ammonia, the hydrogen, the sodium chromate, and the water. What do they do? How does that work? Okay, well, let's talk about the ammonia part. Okay, so here's my pointer down here. I'm going to back up a little bit. Okay, so ammonia is going to go through 4 state changes in one cycle. We're going to start our story right down here. And again, we're following the trail of ammonia. So down here, ammonia is a liquid, okay? It's a liquid because it's in the distilled water. It's going to follow down this tube, okay? It's going to go into this boiler right here. Now, the temperature is very important. So I'm going to do another video where I'm going to dive really, really deep into the burner. Okay, we've got some questions. I have one video on refrigerator works on an electric but not on LP, but we're going to do another one where I'm going to really go into the burner. And but what we're looking for is a very specific BTU. So the BTU could come from these boiler, the burner from the LP, or it could come from the heater elements. If you do replace your heater elements, you do want to make sure that those heater elements are of the same wattage, the same diameter, and the same length, okay? Again, I'm going to go into much more detail on all that in another video where we're going to really dive deep on that. But in this area right in here in this boiler, we're going to get the ammonia, we're going to get that water up to a boiling point. Now this could be anywhere from 300 to 1,000 degrees right in this point right here. Now remember we talked about that ammonia is going to vaporize out of the water. So here we have the boiler tube, okay, and you got that coffee thing that's percolating. So here we have a tube within a tube, okay. Now let me get a little closer and I'm going to show you something. I'm going to actually zoom in on the camera right there. What we have right here is we've got a transition in this tube. Here you have the outer tube, and here we have the inner tube, the outer tube and the inner tube. And this is that transition where those two tubes come together, okay? So let me zoom back out. So that tube transition took place right there. And you have the tube within a tube that goes all the way down. And if you look down in here, right here, you could see where the tube from the absorber vessel is joined by the outer tube. And then we're going to talk about why that does that and where this tube goes here in just a minute. So water, ammonia is absorbed in it, flows down through here, goes through our boiler. We talked about how important that BTU is. It's going to come up here. There's a tube within a tube. You're going to have a percolation factor going on in here. Okay, so what's happening here is the ammonia is bubbling out of the solution. And so as that ammonia bubbles out of the solution, he's going to come into part of it that's called the rectifier. This area here, this curvy thing, there's a lot of surface area right there, okay? And we're going to get into the condenser in a minute. But what we're doing in this surface area here is we're done with the water. The ammonia is going to stay as a vapor. The water is going to fall back down. Now let's leave our ammonia. So the ammonia is boiled out. You got ammonia vapor right here following up this tube, okay? And we're going to pick up the ammonia back up here on the top on the condenser, but let's follow that water. What happens to the water as it falls out, as it cools down? Well, the water's going to fall back down. Remember that transition that's about right there? So the water's going to fall out. Now we're going to be on the outer tube. Okay, we picked up our ammonia and our water here on that inner tube, but as it boils out here, the water's going to fall back down, and it's going to fall back down, and it's going to go on the outer tube. So the outer tube has got some super hot water. It's going to help to create this heat exchanger here to help that ammonia and that water work even more efficiently, okay? And that water is going to fall all the way back down here, all the way down here, all the way down here, water. The water is on the outer tube, right? So he's going to follow this smaller tube right here. Now let me get a little closer in on that, okay? So follow my finger. Okay, so the water that just got percolated out and follows it is not going to go back to the vessel. That water is going to work his way back up. He's going to work his way back up, and he's going to join us. Hold on, bear with me. I know the shadows are here. He's going to join us at the top of the absorber vessels. Okay, I know you're crooked. So see where my finger is right there? Let me get my little pointy stick. Let me zoom out here. Okay, so this is good right here. Water and ammonia, inner tube, go down through here. Water seeks its own level, so that's always full of water, right? We turn on the refrigerator. The correct BTU right here causes the water to boil. Ammonia vaporizes out of the water. Remember we talked about that? There's a transition right here. This goes into the rectifier. The rectifier goes up, a lot of surface area. Sometimes you'll even have dimples on here that are even more surface area that the water can kind of collect on and drop out. The ammonia continues up to the top as a vapor. The water falls out. The water falls down, where are we at here? Onto the outer tube. The water falls down, falls down, falls down on the outer tube, outer tube, outer tube, goes into this smaller tube, and the water then comes up to the top of the merry-go-round, the roller coaster thing. Now we're going to pick that water back up in a minute, but that's going to be some pretty hot water, okay? We need water entering the top of this, okay? So we're going to stop the water story there, but that's where that water's going, and we're going to pick up at the top of that condenser. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this, jump up on a ladder, and look down inside of this and show you the story of what's going on inside of that condenser. So at this point, we understand what the water and the ammonia are doing. Okay, but let me just mention this one more thing. The water, again, story of ammonia. Ammonia was a liquid. Now the ammonia is a vapor. Okay, so now the ammonia is a vapor. We want the ammonia to go back to a liquid here. Okay, so we're going to get that cooled back down. We want the ammonia to go back to a liquid. Now the ammonia is a liquid. By the time it gets back up in here, it's going to go back to a vapor. It's going to evaporate. Now the ammonia is back to a vapor. And this is where the hydrogen part is. We're jumping ahead, and then the ammonia is going to come back down here, become back to a liquid again. So the ammonia goes from liquid to vapor to liquid to vapor. Okay. So in one loop, the ammonia goes liquid vapor, liquid vapor. The other thing I wanted to point out here is there's two heat exchangers going on in this evaporation. There's a gas heat exchanger up at the top where the ammonia evaporates into the hydrogen. That's a gas heat exchanger, and we are exchanging heat. We are absorbing the heat in the ice box and in the fresh food compartment. So that's a heat exchanger done in gas. Okay, the ammonia vaporizes, absorbs the heat out of the environment, and then it travels down. Then we have another heat exchanger, which is a liquid heat exchanger. This is where all the heat that it absorbed up here is absorbed into the water, and that's why it's so important to have ventilation off the backside of your cooling unit to scrub that heat off. Okay, so 4 stages the ammonia goes through, or 4 steps: liquid, vapor, and 2 heat exchangers: gas heat exchanger, liquid heat exchanger. So with that, where we left off on our ammonia, we started off as a liquid, made it up here, we've got rid of the water, hopefully, cross our fingers, and now we're going to drop the temperature again, and we're going to turn that ammonia vapor back to a liquid in this condenser. We're going to condense the vapor. We're going to condense it back to a liquid. So let me climb up on a ladder and shine down inside of that and show you what's going on inside of the condenser. Okay, we've picked up the trail on this tube right here. Let me pan you around here. Where's everybody? So we're on this tube. I'm at the top now. That's the top of the rectifier. Okay, and we're now coming around here. Sorry if I'm moving around, everybody. And now the ammonia follows on this tube here. Okay, it might still be a vapor at this point. We're following on around, and now let me shine the camera down inside, you're going to see the ammonia is going to make this, where am I at? The ammonia is going to make this turn, and it's going to go through all these fins. Okay, follow that one. He's going to make a loop back. There's some fancy stuff going on over here. I'm going to come back over here and spend a minute or two over on this side, but then we're going to follow the inner side, and then we're going to go back around and follow to here. Okay, so now I'm going to camp out over on this side because there's a lot of plumbing going on over here. Okay, so if we followed our ammonia, there's a lot going on in here, and this is a Norcold 1200 cooling unit. There's different cooling units. The concept is the same. So I don't want to get too down into the nitty gritty on this specific cooling unit, because you might have a Dometic, you might have a different Norcold. Atwood played around with helium a little bit for a while. But anyway, this middle tube here on this one is where the ammonia is going to come out of the condenser. And it has an opportunity here. I'm trying to get the camera in there, but there's a lot going on. But here's the net result of this. The net result of all this plumbing is that we want to get the ammonia back to a liquid, a strong ammonia liquid. Okay, and this smaller tube, we're going to take that ammonia from a larger tube to a smaller tube. Okay, so at this point, we're going to stop the trail of ammonia. Again, the first time we stopped the trail of ammonia right before it was a vapor, then we went to this condenser. The purpose of this condenser is to get the ammonia to condense back down to a liquid. So let's pause on the trail of ammonia right at this point. Okay, at this point right here at this point right here, where the ammonia comes into that small tube. And now what I want to do is I'm going to talk about the hydrogen, because it's where this ammonia liquid, a strong ammonia liquid, is going to be joined by hydrogen at this point. So let me bring hydrogen into the loop. Where does this tube come from? Okay, so in order for that, we're going to come back down here. Yes, we have a cat visiting us. Okay, so we're back down to the absorber vessel. This is where the water's coming back. We've talked about the water loop, and then the water's coming on this tube right here. This one is where the hydrogen is at a solution. We haven't got to the stage yet, but just stay with me. So this tube goes up, up, up. Okay, and where are we at? He's going to join in with the ammonia at this point. So here's where the hydrogen and the ammonia join. Hydrogen being a gas at this point, always. Ammonia being a liquid at this point. Okay, so we have liquid ammonia and a hydrogen gas. They're in a small tube. Now that's important that they're in a small tube. I'm going to switch hands and go this way. So now we are in this tube. Okay, do you see up there where they joined? The hydrogen coming in from this guy, and this is being a gas, and the ammonia coming in through this. So now we have everything in this tube. So at this part of our story, the ammonia has gone from a liquid in the water. It vaporized out. It became a vapor. It condensed back down, and now we've got the water out. So basically, we've got the water out. We've got the hydrogen in. Okay, water's out, hydrogen in. It's under pressure right here. Okay, he's going through this tube, and he's under pressure. Now there's a little branch right here. We're going to talk about him in just a second. But what's going to happen is that ammonia and that hydrogen is going to work back up this tube. Still, it's like pre-cooling himself, and he's just working his way around and around and around and around and around. So that ammonia liquid and that hydrogen gas is in this tube, and look what they do right here. They join this larger tube. Okay, the thing is, this is where the vaporization of the ammonia begins. When it goes from a smaller tube to a larger tube, this is the point where that ammonia starts to vaporize. Hydrogen, it vaporizes into the hydrogen in a larger tube. And I was floating in the hot tub the other day trying to visualize how can I explain that. And the night before, we had used our pressure cooker to pressure cook some ribs. Highly recommend that. Throw them on the smoker with some mesquite chips, and then throw your ribs in the pressure cooker. Oh my God, it's just delicious. It falls off. And so the pot was in the pressure, and when we released that pressure, all that steam that was a liquid under pressure vaporized into our kitchen and just stunk up the whole kitchen. It was wonderful. And so that's kind of what's going on in here. We have a pressure, this is under pressure, and it goes into a larger a larger space. Like on our pressure cooker, we released that little lever and all the steam came out. So it went from high pressure to low pressure. So there's a pressure drop right here. And when we go from a high pressure to low pressure, that's where the steam happens, okay? So in this larger tube, the ammonia is vaporizing rapidly. The hydrogen and the ammonia, they just rapidly vaporize. And so wasn't the ammonia pretty hot coming into here? The ammonia was pretty hot. And so we bring that ammonia along these tubes here to pre-cool it, if you will, okay? And by the time we get to here, it's pre-cooling, and then all of a sudden it vaporizes. And as soon as it vaporizes, bam, we have that immediate cooling reaction going on because of the vaporization effect. Now we have this large tube going around and around, okay? And this is your low temperature evaporator. Why do we call it the evaporator? Because that's where all of the ammonia is evaporating. And as it evaporates is where we have absorption of heat. Okay, in that environment, that heat is being absorbed in that ammonia. And then we're going to work our way back down to the high temperature vaporizer. Okay, this point here would be about 15 degrees. Right in this area is where that little pressurization, that pressure drop takes place, right in here. Okay, so we're talking about pressure. Now at this point, the ammonia is at about 14 pounds of pressure. By the time it gets down here, it's about 40 pounds of pressure. So that ammonia it built up pressure. The hydrogen pressure decreased, the ammonia pressure increased. It absorbed a lot of heat, and it started out at minus 28 or colder, maybe down to minus 100. Maybe I've even read that it can get down to minus 122 up in there. By the time it gets down to here, it's closer to 15 degrees. Okay. Now, then it makes an immediate drop. So here we're done with our back and forth zigzaggy tubes. Okay, different manufacturers do it different way. You'll see that Norcold added an extra tube down here. Okay, but conceptually that's what's going on. So if I zoom out, you'll see that we went through our condenser. We got our zigzaggy tubes absorbing all that temperature. Why am I absorbing it? I'm absorbing it because I am vaporizing. Why am I vaporizing? Because of the pressure drop. Okay, and pressure. I'm under pressure. There's a pressure drop. I add the hydrogen in there to act as a thermal carrier of the heat. Okay, so now my hydrogen's being weighted down by all the ammonia, and right here we have this tube. Again, look here, we're almost at the point where the water and the hydrogen join back in together. But anyway, the vapor, now we're a vapor, we're being pushed. Like, okay, we're a vapor and we're being pushed because there's more coming down. So we're being pushed as a vapor, pushed as a vapor, pushed as a vapor. I have no option but to go down, and that vapor is going to go right down here. I'm a vapor, right? So the vapor is going to be pushed straight down into this leveling vessel, absorption vessel. And then the vapor, okay, the vapor is going to start working its way back up, backward style through this. So the vapor, the ammonia and the hydrogen vapor is working its way backwards up this like a smokestack as a vapor going back up. Okay, again, it's been heated. It needs to get rid of all that heat that it absorbed. Okay, so now we're a vapor going back into this vessel. Didn't I say earlier that water is absorbed readily? I'm sorry, that ammonia is absorbed into water. Well, that's what's going on right here. Is we need to get that ammonia out of the hydrogen and free up that hydrogen. As that ammonia and that hydrogen work their way back up this as a vapor, the water, remember the water? We left the water off because the water came out of this rectifier and went back on the outer tube here and came down, split off into the smaller tube right here and worked its way back up and joined at the very top. So as that vapor is working up, that water is working down. And so the vapor's going up, the hydrogen, the ammonia vapor's going up, the water's going down, and all that ammonia is readily absorbed into that water, as we talked about earlier. That's why I went into so much detail earlier on the chemical properties of some of these things. So by the time you get down here, the hydrogen's like, I'm done, I've had it, I'm out of here. Hydrogen being a lighter gas, the ball and chain of the ammonia has released the hydrogen. The hydrogen then goes back up this smaller tube here and goes back up there to join the ammonia liquid to start the process again. Now the ammonia liquid, simplify, the ammonia liquid is going to go through here under pressure. 14 pounds right there, actually right there. Larger vessel, think of my pressure cooker. We had steam in the kitchen, stinking up the whole neighborhood with our beautiful, yummy pork ribs. And then you have cooling there. So in final review, let's do this one last time, okay? We're gonna start off our story down here. This is a liquidy part. Water seeks its own level, so therefore all this is liquidy. We have a tube within a tube. Go look at yours, you're gonna see a small tube and a big tube here. This is all liquidy, water's always filling this. We have an X amount of BTUs that the manufacturer wants to spec here with heat, whether it's from electric or from the BTU on your furnace. Okay, anyway, we're gonna start creating a vaporization of the ammonia and the water. The water's gonna start boiling. You're gonna have ammonia bubbles boiling out of this thing, like percolating out, percolating out, percolating out. We have a transition right here. The water and the that comes out of here is gonna work its way back down, 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 back into the top of this. So now that water, we're done with water. Water's job is to get the ammonia out. So water goes from here to here, okay? Now, the whole thing's not filled with water. The water is only this high. But once you start to vaporize the water, it starts to expand and bubble up. And all the water wants to do is get back to here. Like, please, 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 let me get back to here. But it can't get back to here because it won't let it. In order for that water to get back to here, it's got to go through this. We're now with the rectifier. The ammonia is a vapor. We go through our condenser. Okay? We're trying to condense the ammonia vapor down into a strong ammonia solution. I want pure, 100% unadulterated, do not pass go, do not collect $200 ammonia. All I want is ammonia in a liquid state. Down here it was a weak ammonia with the water. Here was a weak ammonia vapor. Up here I want a strong ammonia liquid. Okay, now we're gonna stop up here. We have our hydrogen coming up here. Hydrogen and ammonia join in here. They then come through this tube. In this tube, we talked about having a ammonia liquid, strong ammonia liquid, and a hydrogen. Hydrogen is just hydrogen. It's gonna come down here. Now, we're gonna start working our way back up. We're kind of pre-cooling. We're pre-cooling some of this, the liquid, because it was pretty hot, right? I mean, it just came through a boiling process, just went through vaporization. So it's hot, now we're starting to cool it down. Right here, we have a pressure differential, where that ammonia is going through a small tube into a larger tube. Remember that pressure cooker analogy I gave? Where inside the pressure cooker, it's all liquidy, but as soon as you flip that vent and into a higher pressure state, a lower pressure state like my kitchen, all that, the water vaporizes and stinks up the neighborhood, which is yummy. So that's what's going on right here. We went from a high pressure to a low pressure state. There's a pressure drop right here, and then we have vaporization. And that's where the ammonia vaporizes. And now we have vaporization, and it's that vaporization of the ammonia that is causing the cooling unit to get cold. It's a vaporization of the ammonia that is causing the cooling unit to get cold. Since I said it twice, that's a test question, a tip. It's in capital letters underlined. Vaporization of ammonia causes cooling. Okay, so we're gonna come on down, come on down, come on down. Now that inside this tube here would have the ammonia and the hydrogen that came out of this process here. Where'd the ammonia and the hydrogen come from? It came from here as a liquid. It's absorbed all the heat. Minus 28 is a vapor pressure of ammonia. That's where it vaporizes, minus 28 degrees. By the time it gets down to here, it's about 15 degrees. And now it's gonna fall down to the bottom of this as a vapor, ammonia, hydrogen, vapor. And that vapor, because it's gonna be lighter, it's gonna start working its way up. As that ammonia is absorbed into this water down here, the hydrogen is free to return. So the hydrogen can come back up here, can come back up here. The hydrogen wants to get back to this tube right here, and it works its way back up the tube, back up to the top. So the hydrogen loop does that. The hydrogen ammonia vapor that didn't do that is working its way back up here. The water that we left off is coming around this tube here to join in. So as the vapor's going up, the water's going down, okay? Two ships passing. And as that ammonia passes through that water, you have, remember, the ammonia readily absorbs into the water. And now we're back where we started again. Yay! So I'm done, folks. I could go on for another hour on these things, and I might do that in other videos because I really want to do a whole video just on heat, where we're going to talk about the BTUs of different refrigerators. It's going to be very exciting, and so we're going to focus just on the heat. We might talk about different ratios of how much hydrogen to how much ammonia to how much sodium chromate to how much water. The water in here is distilled water. We might even, as a science project, make one of these things with titration tubes and little clear tubes. That might be kind of exciting. What do you think, Dakota? You like that? That might be kind of fun. And I think what we might do is, I don't have time to do this now, but I thought it might be a fun thing to do, to take a Sawzall and slice all these things up to see the tubes within tubes. Don't have time to do that, so I'm not going to do that. Do it to yours. So these are going to be going off to the scrapyard, shredded, melted down to become something else. Boom, I'm done. If this was helpful, if this added value to you, if this in any way gave you some insight into who our 16th president was, give us a thumb up. You could join us on Patreon. We're asking folks to go to Patreon. There's a community RV community thing. We're asking for $5. That really helps to pay for little things like that. And new lavaliers so the sound gets better. Share this with your friends. Subscribe to our channel. Happy campers, say my RV works. So until the next video, this is Darren from Port Angeles signing off, and our camera guy here. And oh wait, one final question. How does heat make cold? Oh, don't you dare. Vaporization.
Vaporization.
Okay, start over. So, in 1858, okay, we're not going to do that to you folks. Okay, until the next video, see you later. Bye-bye.